So today I can finally put out in the garden my tomatoes and peppers that you see right here. Tomatoes are right here. They're doing pretty good in these small cells. They really need to go because you know, they have their first set of true leaves, but they're also starting their second set of true leaves. So they really need to get out. And here are some peppers. And they're about ready. So this year has been a little bit of a collection of circumstances. So we normally, so our last frost date here in North Texas is about April 15th, but we had some prolonged cold weather, and then we had some crazy storms. In the past couple of days, we had some crazy rains. So, and these tomatoes and peppers they really like the hot weather or the warm weather, but they really don't like the cold weather. So I just didn't find the time or the right time to get them out in the garden. Just to give you an example, this was empty, but over the last 2 days or so, and this thing is supposed to have holes in the bottom that got clogged up by wood chips sometime, but this has like, I don't know, 3 inches of rain in it or so, just from the last 48 hours or so. So it wasn't a great time to transplant these, and I'm also a little bit late because first of all I didn't start early enough, of course. I keep telling myself every year like, oh, I need to start earlier, but when I finally ordered seeds and when I got everything ready, then there was like a rush on seeds and everything. So a lot of places were sold out, and then there was a place that still had the seeds that I wanted, but it took about 5 weeks or more to ship them. So I really should have started these in the beginning of March, but it ended up happening in near half or end of April. But anyway, well, you can, if you want a video on seed starting, you should watch something by The Rusted Garden or by M.I. Gardner, because they cover all that in depth. So this is not it. This is just why I'm late. But another consideration is if you start them in these small cells, I mean these guys, they can stay in these small cells for about a month, and they've been in these for about a month. But if you start them way earlier, then you need to move them up, and every time you move them up, some don't make it. So what I'm going to do next year, this is the tray of herbs and everything that I started, when was that? April 1st. So next year I ordered this box full of bigger cells. So these are about double the size of those. And they also fit inside the same tray, so I'm not gonna use these small cells, but I'm just gonna put half the amount of bigger cells in the same trays, and that way they can stay in there longer and develop their roots better, etc., etc. So next year I'm just gonna start them in these bigger ones and not gonna bother with potting them up, because last year I was trying to be like all the big garden channels. I wanted them outside, big and ready, just when the time was right. But then the weather changed. It was a little bit too cold, or there were a lot of storms, and I had to keep them inside for an extra week or so. And the plants really needed to get out because they were getting too big for the pots or for the cells. So what I'm going to do next year, I'm going to start everything about 6 weeks before the last frost date, so that it could go out around the last frost date, but if the weather is bad, then I could also keep them in for a couple more weeks. So that would be a little bit less stressful. So with all that rain and all the storms and everything, these sunflowers, some of them started to look really sad because it was raining. There was no sun and it was raining and windy for like at least 2 days in a row. But they've recovered pretty well. They're all perking up again, and so that's good. And then the cucumbers, of course, they're a little bit fragile. They started to look a little bit sad, but they're doing fine right now. And back to the tomatoes and the peppers. So there's some empty cells there. You can see there the label sunflower. So all those other empty cells are the sunflowers, the small ones that I put in there. The bigger ones were from a previous tray. And then the row next to it on the right half, those were tomato seeds from last year that I still had left over, but I gave them all to my mother-in-law because I watched a video by Jess from Roots and Refuge on all the must-have heirloom plants, and so that's why I waited so long, because I started the seeds that I had already. Those just came from big box stores, from Walmart, Home Depot, whatever. But I already grew those the last 2 years, and I wanted to try these new heirlooms. But since the seeds took so long and they only came here end of April, I really wanted to grow these heirlooms. So what we're growing this year are, let's see, what does it say? Kellogg's Breakfast, Pink Oxheart, and Paul Robeson. And so that's why I waited so long. And I also started just in case that those new tomato seeds wouldn't arrive in time at all. I put the old seeds in, and I grew some tomatoes, and but then the new seeds arrived, and and that was pretty much after our last frost date. So I could have put them just straight in the garden, but I have had enough bad luck with putting seeds in the ground that I didn't just want to wait for a seed to come up, because not all seeds do come up. For the tomatoes, I put because these are relatively expensive. Not really. They're like $2.50 for 25 seeds, so they're like 10 cents a pop. But normally you would put 2 seeds in each cell. But I want to make these last because these are a little bit more special. And you can see, like here there's 6 and 1 didn't come up, and then the next one there's 6 and 1 didn't come up. There's an empty cell right there. Well, you should have about 90% germination rate, otherwise they can't even sell it to you. So that's about right. And then the peppers also, these are just regular peppers. A few different kinds, some California Wonders. One on the left is Tangerine Dream. These are small orange peppers. What's this? This is probably the California Wonder. Yeah. What's this? Pepper New Mexico, grape pepperoncini. And as you can also see, these ones didn't come up at all. Well, just one of them, and it's tiny. So I always put in a little bit more. So if I want 3 or 4 tomatoes, I probably would put in double. And so it's gonna work out. But what I did with these was, because it was getting so close to, well, actually they could have been started outside straight away. So what I did was I just kept them inside in a south-facing window until they germinated, because tomatoes and peppers like warm soil to be germinated. And then as soon as they germinated, I started bringing them outside so that I don't have to go through the hardening off process before I need to get them to the garden. So yeah, these guys are ready, and they're gonna go into the garden in a little bit, in the next hour or so. Let me show you. I already prepared the plant holes. I mentioned it before, how I do it. The tomatoes have to be about 1.5 to 2 feet apart. Depends on your preference. They really need to be 1.5 apart because they grow so big. But then it will require more work pruning them. And if you put them 2 feet apart, then you don't have to prune them as much because they have room to grow. So what I did was I dug as many holes as I could, 1.5 foot apart for the tomatoes here on the left side, because these are the special seeds. So I didn't want to waste any transplants, and what's probably going to happen if I have any left over, I will have some left over, but I'm just gonna hold on to them in a tray, and then if one of them doesn't survive the transplant, then I have one to replace it, and if I do have some, if they all succeed, then I'll probably put them in an empty spot somewhere between the cucumbers. There are some empty spots there, and there's some empty spots there between the sunflowers, so I'm not gonna waste any seedlings. And then on the right, the peppers only have to be like about a foot apart. So I dug a hole every foot or so. And like I said in my video from last week, what I do is I just dig a hole about a foot wide, about a foot deep. Well, especially for the tomatoes, I dig it about a foot deep. For the peppers, less so. It's maybe 8 or 10 inches deep. They don't get as big. And so I throw in 2 scoops of this organic garden soil that has a little bit of everything. It has like shredded wood and core and peat moss and fertilizer or in compost and whatever. And I throw in a handful of that granular fertilizer. So, and you can't really see it because they're almost the same color, but there's like so there's 2 scoops of that garden soil, and then just a dusting of the granular fertilizer. And then because the planting holes are a little bit smaller for the peppers, and they also don't need as much, I just put in like 1 scoop of the garden soil and a little bit less, just this, just proportionally, just a dusting of the fertilizer. And then once you've done that, you just mix it all together. And now, you just mix it all together with your garden scoop, and then you pull in all the soil that you dug out, and you mix it up, and then you make a little hole where you're gonna plant your plant. And the same here, so the hole is a little bit smaller because it's a pepper. And so you mix it all together, pull in the soil that you dug out, mix it all together, and then make a little hole. Yeah, so these holes are pretty small because sometimes on other channels you see people starting peppers and tomatoes like 10 weeks or 12 weeks before they go out. I didn't have time to do that, so they're gonna be, planted in a pretty tiny hole because they don't have that many roots yet. And with a tomato, you can plant them pretty deep. So if you see all those little hairs, on the tomato, those are all roots. If you would put that in the ground, they will grow roots. So, but because these are pretty small, they don't have to go that deep. But if they were, 6 weeks older, I would plant them about a quarter or third of the way in. So like where the first leaves start. Okay, so I guess that's the update for now. They look pretty good if I show them like this. They look pretty big for these small cells, but once I put them in the garden, you won't be able